EMT/paramedics of Reddit. What last words did you hear that will stick with you forever? It wasn't my patient, but a fellow paramedic. He had a mid-30s age male who had injuries that really didn't give him much of a shot, even if he would have been in the ER when it happened. He looked at my friend and asked about the injuries. When my friend responded, he shrugged his shoulders and responded, "At least it's not raining." The man's optimism, even in the face of death, will never leave me. As far as myself, I haven't had anyone say anything profound, but I'm not sure the screams will ever go away. Next story. Reminds me of the second code I ever worked in my career. It was for an unresponsive female, mid-80s, last spoken to 12 hours prior. We get in the apartment and it is immediately apparent that our patient is deceased. Skin like porcelain and veins like midnight. Rigor had already come and gone, and dependent lividity was setting in. We worked the code because I was super new and needed the experience, and because her daughter was in the room with us. We transferred the patient to the floor from the recliner and I began compressions. That is the moment locked in my memory, because on the first push about 3 or 4 ribs snapped all at once, like a bundle of tinder dry kindling. The combination of horrified gasp and bereaved sob that escaped her daughter made me freeze for about 2 seconds. Fire took the daughter out of the room after that, and we kept working. I'm a fairly morbid and cynical person, comfortable with and fascinated by death so much so that, until then, I'd routinely forget just how grave and unsettling it is for most people. I don't forget how other people feel about death anymore. I think a certain degree of that is useful in that line of work. If you're completely callous to it all, you just end up hurting people who are already hurting a lot, I'm sure. Not forgetting how other people feel about death is important, OP. And a good lesson to learn early on. Next story. Long ago, when I lived in Montana, I was friends with a guy and his wife. All of us were hippies. The guy was a very good artist and cool guy with long hair. He was missing some teeth and wasn't particularly good looking, but everyone liked him. He and his wife separated because of some bullcrap my then husband started. The rumor was that me and the guy had been seeing each other. Impossible. One night the guy was driving along on a major highway and no one is sure what exactly happened, but he ran his car into the back of a logging truck. He might have been drinking, I don't really know. As he lay on the road dying, he said to the person who came to his aid, "Is this all there is?" Then he died. Next story. I'm not an EMT, but the daughter of a patient. My mum said this before she died. She was in the hospital and fluid was building in her lungs. She kept asking me for oxygen, but it wasn't helping. Her nurse transferred her to a bed chair as she couldn't lay down anymore without choking. So that night she slept slumped over in the chair. The next morning she said she couldn't breathe no matter what she did and told me to gather the kids together, my 3 siblings and I. This was at 8 a.m. She kept asking me throughout the day if I can handle everything. I kept saying, "You don't need to worry. I'll take care of the kids. I got this." She kept telling me she wasn't ready. She kept asking if she was a good mother. I had to tell my little siblings that our mum wasn't going to make it. She held on until every single one of her children arrived around 8 that night. The second we all gathered into the room with her, she drew her last shallow breath. I can't recall what exactly her last words were, but I think it was some sarcastic comment to the JP. I think her last words to me, though, were, "Was I a good mother?" She was only 53. I was 23. My youngest sibling was 9. Next story. Not a first responder, but an anesthesiologist. The ones that always stick with me are when a patient is scared before a big case, like a cardiac bypass surgery, and they're looking for reassurance. You tell them all you're going to take great care of them, and you do. Sometimes, though, they never wake up or come off the bypass pump despite your best efforts. Pretty depressing knowing their last words after decades of life are asking for reassurance, and you tell them you'll do your best, only for your best to not be good enough to top Mother Nature. If it's any consolation, these people probably went under believing and hoping, and that's not the worst last thought to have, right? With any luck, if OP did their job, they really shouldn't have felt anything or had any sense of dread approach them. So of all the ways to go, it really doesn't sound like the worst. And I have no doubt that OP really did do their best every single time. Just not every operation can be a successful one. You're doing good work, OP. Keep it up. Next story. Volunteered a hospice clinic in my town in the Butterfly Ward. It's a ward for people with less than a month for children ages 0 to 18. The kid said, "Where's Saya? I want to say goodbye. Please let me see Saya." Saya is my German Shepherd that accompanied me most days, but she hurt her paw that morning on a walk. This kid, 6 years old, had fallen in love with her. I felt absolutely horrible. Next story. not EMT, but the last words from my dad, who was recovering from multiple heart attacks in a hospital in Atlanta. I was at work in Florida, were, "It's really icy up here. Don't come up. I'll worry about you on the roads. I'll come down there to recover. Promise. I love you, buddy. Bye." I could have made it. He died 8 hours later from a massive heart attack. I was 22 and he was 56. I'm 45 now. I missed the good years, the friend years, the adult years. Tell your parents you love them. Lots. Next story. I was transporting a young psychiatric patient who was being transferred to a long-term mental care facility. He was especially prone to fits of extreme violence. He had attacked his teacher and some classmates quite badly, and we were moving him out of state to a secure facility. He was doped up, like hospital cocktail doped up, at least according to the ED discharge paperwork. We went over a bridge, and when we bumped on the expansion joints, he woke a little. I held my breath as I watched a fly buzz around and land on his face. This kid's eyes popped open, and he started yelling at me that he was gonna get out of here, and ain't no one gonna lock me up. I told him we were on a bridge, and he wasn't going anywhere even if he did escape. He was struggling so violently, he worked his way out of the restraints. Where I live, we're limited in the type of restraining we're allowed to use in an ambulance. This kid looked me dead in the eyes and asked, "You ever end anyone before?" I was taken a bit back by the question, and I responded, no. To which he responded with, "Well, then I guess I'm safe," and started swinging. An all-out brawl between him and I exploded in the back of the ambulance, and I had my partner go lights and sirens to the psych hospital and to notify local PD of the incident. Honestly, it's that question. You ever end anyone before? He knew exactly how far he was willing to fight to escape. He knew exactly what he wanted and was willing to fight pretty freaking hard for it. It's so eerie every time I remember it. It's surreal, like he must have picked this up out of a movie or something. Normal people don't equate not dying and being safe. In the moment, it was honestly horror movie level creepy. Next story. Not a paramedic or EMT, but I gotta get this off my chest. Iraq, 2009. Couple of different times on radio watch, basically just sitting and listening for anything of note on the comms. Heard a call go out for a medevac. Not even 2 minutes later, the status of the casualty changed. I could hear the emotion in the RTO's tone. Went from, "Hey, hurry up," to just flat. Dust off one, status change. Mark as KIA. Another time, a call went out for a medevac. The RTO was calm as could be, but in the background, God, I could hear this kid begging while the medics were doing everything they could, and the RTO and medevac station were coordinating. Last thing I heard from the kid was, "Thanks, Doc." I looked up the guy's battle roster number, and he was only 19. It's been 10 years and I still hear these transmissions in my freaking sleep. I've only ever told 2 people about them, just marked them in my radio log with the battle roster numbers and tried to forget. If this isn't a huge point in favor of mental health services being available for service members, I don't know what is. OP went through hell, and it sounds like he still goes through it. Things like these are things that humans are simply not equipped to deal with, or at least they shouldn't be. Some people can handle it fine, I'm sure, but I would wager that most can't, and that is perfectly fine. OP, for your sake, I hope one of those 2 people you told was a therapist of some kind. And if not, I hope you look into it. Next story. Current FF/EMT. I don't really recall any crazy last words. When you're working on a patient, you tend to filter out a lot of the background noise. But these 2 have stuck with me for a while, and probably will forever. First one was a female, 9 months pregnant, altered LOC. We get on scene, she looks at me and my crew and says, "Take care of him," then codes. Holy crap. We work the code, get to the trauma bays, wheel her in, and as I'm still pumping her chest, OB does an emergency C-section. They work the newborn, land a helicopter on the pad for transport, and it's just a whirlwind. Mother was called pretty much right after, and we learned the newborn was called in the air. We did everything we could, everything right. They still both passed. As a dad, it destroyed me. The other one, the one that keeps me up at night, was the male patient that wrapped his truck around a steel pole. This caused a fuel leak that engulfed the passenger compartment. We got on scene early enough in the rescue to hear him scream, get the Hearst tools out, and watch him die before I could get the A-post off his pinned legs. The extrication took 20 minutes after that because of how mangled everything was, but watching a man burn to death is forever burned into my brain. Those screams will never go away. Next story. Not last words, because the guy survived just fine. Iraq 2005. We're being peppered with fires, so we have to sprint across a road to get somewhere safe. It's my buddy's turn to go, and before he makes the sprint of death, he looks back to us and shouts, If I get shot, tell my mom I said something cool. And he runs. We looked at each other and said, what the hell did he just say? I'll never forget that. Next story. EMR here. Got called to a code with one of our AEMTs. CPR in progress. Husband doing compressions on his unresponsive wife. Slap on the LUCAS, and I'm bagging while the A is IOing her leg. While bagging, her right eyelid opened and she was fixed and dilated. At some point, her husband said, "This is bad, isn't it?" And I'll never forget the tone of his voice. It seemed so distant. He knew. We worked her all the way to the hospital. She never made it. Next story. Client, 78, post-stroke with 0 language. He couldn't do anything but make noises and point. We had run-ins over the years with his behavioral issues, including predatorial advances on male patients. End-stage renal failure, and I was trying to give him some ice cream. As a diabetic, he loved it. Grabbed my hand, looked at me, and said, "Done." Honestly, to this day, I have trouble believing he said it, but then he closed his eyes and never regained consciousness. One of the days I cried in the break room. I don't know if this is taking away from the emotional hit of this, but why did OP mention the predatory behavior? Or if they did, why did they try to make him sound so sad and sympathetic after? I don't know. Call me crazy. You didn't have me rooting for the guy necessarily. I'm not saying I wanted him to die. I gotta make that super clear. But he did not sound like the hero of the story. Next story. Not a paramedic, just first on scene after a head-on collision, car versus truck. Driver of the car was pinned in his vehicle, bleeding heavily from a broken femur, bones showing. We were miles from the nearest town. The ambulance took 20 minutes to arrive. I held his hand the whole time kneeling on the pavement, my pants soaking wet from his blood dripping out of the bottom of the door. The whole time he kept saying, "My dog, is my dog okay? You have to help my dog." His dog in the backseat was by some miracle completely unhurt, just very scared. The guy lost consciousness shortly before the ambulance got there and died en route to the hospital. Next story. I don't feel so good. My paramedic partner got on scene of a call and said a man was pinned between 2 cars, but was still stable and talking. Said it was like a 6 out of 10 pain after meds administered. They were about to fly out a surgeon and do a bilateral leg field amputation when he looked at them and said, "I don't feel so good," before slumping over. Next story. Not the target demographic, but I'm an ICU nurse. Most people don't say anything before they die. Most of the deaths I see you can see coming for a while, and the patient is not in talking shape. They're on a breathing machine or their breathing is so screwed up that they're about to be. In this case, they aren't very coherent most of the time. The really sad ones are where the patient is still coherent and you know something bad is about to happen. Say if you have a patient in profound respiratory distress and you tell them you're going to put them to sleep and put a breathing tube in, assuring them it will be okay, and their heart stops during the intubation. Those suck. Although occasionally you will have someone up in a chair and they just keel over, mostly go into a fatal arrhythmia. Also, a lot of people die on the toilet. Next story. Really not words that bothered me the most. Was called to a store for a woman having seizures, and when we arrived, we found an attractive middle-aged woman as the patient. She was a cancer patient that had been in remission, and with the seizures, clearly the cancer had returned and spread to her brain. I collected the required information and gave the inbound hospital report as quickly and quietly as possible. The woman was absolutely quiet, and tears were streaming down her face. She considered her life sentence. I did my best to maintain my composure for the trip to the hospital, gave my report to the receiving nurse, went outside and cried myself. As a paramedic, you learn to accept injuries, illness, death, and destruction, but there are some things touching your heart you can't process. Next story. RN here. Elderly lady who I looked after for a few days. We withdrew active treatment and made her comfortable. She was in and out of consciousness for the last few hours, but at one point she woke up, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "I'm dying, aren't I?" I responded with, "Well, we're all dying, really." She smiled and squeezed my hand, and closed her eyes for the last time. She died about an hour later. Next story. I had a patient that was having a massive STEMI, heart attack. He was completely soaked in sweat and had 10 out of 10 chest pain. We got to the ER, and as we were rolling him in, he was pleading with me to help me. At that moment, he codes. We were unable to get him back. Also had a patient who was in an accident on a motorcycle versus a pickup truck. We had him in the back of the truck waiting on the helicopter. Being in a rural area, we're 50 minutes out from a trauma center with the lights and sirens. The patient was complaining of being short of breath and leg pain. He had a dismembered foot along with the diminished lung sounds. The patient was on alert and oriented the entire time until the helicopter landed. As the flight medics got on the truck, the patient started saying over and over, "I can't breathe. Don't let me go." Within a minute, the patient went into traumatic arrest and we were unable to get him back. The patient's wife was riding next to him at the time of the crash and was in the front of the truck when her husband passed. Seeing her face in the window between the compartments is something I will never forget. Next story. This story hurts to tell. I wasn't an EMT, but I'm CPR certified. I witnessed a hit and run about 10 years back. The guy was hit by a car while crossing the crosswalk and I happened to be walking by. I quickly got out my phone and started calling 911. The driver got out of his vehicle to check on him, but as soon as he saw me, he got back into his car and drove away. I went to check on the guy, but he seemed to be bleeding really badly from his skull. I told 911 the streets and that the guy had been hit by a car. I went to see if there was anything I could do for him. He just looked at me and asked, "Is this the end?" He slipped away pretty quickly. Nothing I could do. I don't really remember the rest of the night. Next story. She didn't die, but my now ex-wife got hit by a truck on her motorcycle. 90% aortic dissection. All bones in her face broken. All teeth knocked out. Massive concussion, trouble breathing, and vomiting blood. As much as I dislike her now, it still brings tears to my eyes, and that sinking feeling of loss, watching her at the hospital thinking I'd lose her. The irony. She looked at me and all she said was, "Why does God hate me? Why do I deserve this?" I had no answer except sobs. I'm going to go cry now. I do think it's funny that OP slipped in the "as much as I dislike her now." OP did not have to say that. They just really wanted to make it clear that they were unhappy with their ex-wife. Makes me want to know more about what happened between them. But also, not what the story is about. Fair enough. Next story. Not an EMT or paramedic. My dad was sick very often and always had hospital trips. He survived with a 10% chance of living one time, but this last hospital trip in 2013, he was in an induced coma. He had double pneumonia and numerous other things going on. My grandmother took me up there to visit him on my spring break. I was 15, and I would often just tell him jokes hoping that he could hear me. My grandmother decided to take a walk while I sat with him. He woke up out of the coma trying to rip the tube out of his mouth. I calmly said, "It's okay, Dad. Don't take that out. You're going to be okay. I love you." He just shook his head no with a tear rolling down his face. The nurse came in and put him back under. I was the last one to speak to my dad. That moment will stick with me forever. Next story. Haven't had any patients say anything, but I had a call where a young male in his early 20s was trying to impress his girlfriend by racing down the freeway and weaving through traffic. Well, he lost control, hit the center divide, and flipped. He wasn't wearing his seatbelt and was ejected at 70 miles per hour and hit the ground. We showed up and he's laying unconscious in a pool of blood. Massive head trauma. His girlfriend had a couple of scrapes, so that's it. Can you guess who was wearing their seatbelt? We load him up and take off. We get to the hospital and he's pronounced by the doctor within 5 minutes. As the doctor's pronouncing him, my phone rings. I pull it out and see it's my friend on the ambulance who took the guy's girlfriend. They went to a different hospital. He says, "Hey bud, I'm with the girlfriend and she wants to know how her boyfriend is doing." The doctor literally just pronounced this guy dead. I'm looking at his lifeless body with an intubation tube sticking out, and I felt so terrible that I had to tell my friend that the boyfriend was dead. There's being the bearer of bad news, and then there's this. I'm glad OP didn't take the easy way out and say, "Oh, we're not sure yet." Like, it's good to get that honest information to the girlfriend. Man, can that just not feel good. Next story. Not a paramedic, but my dad was. He passed recently to kidney cancer. Not sure if they were his last words, but the last words I ever heard him say were in the hospice center when my grandmother, his mother, visited. At this point, he was incredibly malnourished as he couldn't eat anything without immediately vomiting it back up. He spent most of his final days unconscious, sleeping. He had basically zero energy. Before my grandmother left, she wanted to say goodbye. She had leg issues and couldn't walk by herself. So my uncle wheeled her over to him in a wheelchair and helped her stand up so she could give him a kiss. He woke up as she was standing over him. He said, "Don't worry about me. I'm fine. I love you." Those were the last words I ever heard him say. He died 2 days later. I don't have a lot to say to close this one out. I don't want to detract from people going on here and basically telling us their trauma. So I'll just say that was the last story for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.